let's talk about valve adjustment. So you pull the valve covers off. You have a two-piece valve covers. When you pull them off, you have access to your injectors. And you got a return line that comes off this. Now if you're replacing the injectors, in my case I'm not, if you're replacing the injectors, the only thing you gotta do is pull these injector lines off. Now, you can reuse them, but you do have to torque them to spec. I'm not 100% sure. I think they're like 15 foot-pounds, maybe 20 inch-pounds. I'm not 100% sure what they are. But, yeah, that's a big difference, I know. But they are Allen head bolts with banjo bolts. You gotta be very careful on not to strip them, especially when they're coming out. So if you gotta replace them, just take your time and pull them out. Then you got your injectors, which your hold down bolts are going to be, get some on this side. You got an injector hold down bolt right here. That's what holds your injectors in place. Once you pull that out, then that clamp comes out, and if they should just wiggle out. They make injector tools that screw in right here, clamp around the injector and pop them out. Sometimes I just take a pair of vice grips and kind of wiggle them, but you don't clamp them on the plastic part on the top, otherwise you're just going to break them off. Now that's just the injector side. Now when you put your new injectors in, they come with plugs on the ends of the injectors. All the injectors you get come with plugs for your return line, the injector nozzle, and the high pressure fuel insert. And I usually try to leave the fuel insert high pressure side on, just so no dirt and debris gets inside of them. Because like I said, if you're spending between, or if you have someone else do it, a shop, you're spending between $2,000 to $10,000 on injectors. So you might as well try to keep them as clean as you possibly can. And then you can put your lower valve covers on. And then right before you're about to put your top valve covers on, your second piece, then you can pull those out. But you make sure they're clean so no debris that's on top of the upper valve covers goes inside and drops in. Another one is, read up online. Everybody has their own way of adjusting the valve lash, doing the valve lash, setting their own setup on this. Internet says 80 on the exhaust, 1,000 on the intake, something like that. Or 15 thousandths on the intake and 13 thousandths on the exhaust, on the Duramax Haynes manual. I run them at 12 on the intake and the exhaust. I've never had any issues with it. Well, that's how I've always run them. And I'll show you how to adjust those real quick. So when you're adjusting these mechanical rockers, here's the number 1 cylinder. I check it, make sure there's any wiggle. Right now it's on overlap, and to double check that, I'm going to crank the engine over with your what size is that? So 1 7/16 12-point socket, and put it on the front of the flywheel, and you should be able to easily pull it over. Now watch the valves. See, they're not moving quite yet because it's on overlap, but you want to adjust it on overlap. But to double check, see that valve going down? Okay, that's done with the exhaust valve, and now the intake valve is going to start going down here. See that? After the intake valve, when you're spinning the engine over clockwise, it should start proceeding to overlap. And once you get to that spot, then you check your rockers. There's a little bit of play in it, a little bit of play on both sides. If you're not on overlap, you won't feel any play in it. Now, what I like to do to make sure I'm actually on overlap, I like to give the engine maybe about another quarter turn clockwise. Okay, then there you go. Then you grab your good old feeler gauge, set at 12 thousandths. And these have, each rocker pushes down 2 valve springs, so there's a rocker arm bridge that's underneath these you want to put in between. So you got, kind of hard to do this holding the camera. There you go. Oh yeah, nice and 12 thousandths. And then this one right here, kind of, if you're not pulling the injection lines in my, or the return lines in my case, I have to go underneath the return lines. It was perfect. Okay. Now when they need to be adjusted, it takes a 14mm wrench, break that loose, and then you take your flat blade screwdriver, back that out, and I'll stick this feeler gauge in there, and I'll turn it until just about, I don't know, you just turn it until you just feel a little bit of resistance on when you feel it bottoming out on this 12 thousandths. Okay, now I keep that feeler gauge in there. Once I feel it's good, I screw that jam nut down. Basically what I do is I just let it hang there. If it falls out, it's too loose. But you also got to wipe all the grease off of it, or oil off the feeler gauge every time you do it, so you get a, you know, an accurate measurement. And then after you're done, you got it set, then you put that jam nut down and you tighten it to whatever specs you want. I put on hand tight. I think they said like 25 foot-pounds or something like that. I put it what I feel like it is. Yeah, pretty much it. Now one thing I did forget to mention when you are adjusting valves, and this goes on through a whole spectrum of, you know, lifter cams and all that stuff. Gas engines, they're the same way too. Mechanical setups, only mechanical setups when you're adjusting the lash. When you're rotating the engine over, I like to do the driver's side bank first, especially on these lb7s. Just do one side at a time once it gets to overlap, and then go on the passenger side and do the same thing. And then I'll go and check about 3-4 times. Yeah, it'll take a couple hours to do. It's a long process, but every time I check it, I just keep checking it and make sure it's all right. Feels good. Now when you put that filler gauge in there, after your final one, and you think it's the last one that you're going to do, or you're pretty sure it's going to last one you do, you run that filler gauge in and out, and there should be a little bit of resistance, and you should be good. Like I said, they're mechanical setups. It's really not that difficult. So get back on it and update on part 5.